If you've been scrolling through endless CNC router listings, comparing frame sizes, motor types, and spindle power, and you still feel that nagging doubt about whether you're about to spend your money on the right machine, this review is here to clear that up. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. I've spent the last few weeks watching a mix of hobbyist builds, reading forum threads about closed-loop stepper reliability, and talking to a couple of makers who actually run a 60/60 sized router in their small batch shop. So I think I can give you a realistic picture of what the Axiscreat 60/60 CNC router will do for you and where it might fall short. First off, the biggest source of buyer hesitation with a machine of this size is the question of will it actually fit in my garage and still be useful? The Axiscreat 60/60 is marketed as a larger work area router, and that does translate into a usable cutting envelope of roughly 600 mm by 600 mm. In practice, that means you can take a full sheet of plywood, a 24 board, or a large piece of acrylic in one go without having to nest cuts. For a hobbyist who's been forced to split projects into multiple passes on a smaller 3018 type machine, that extra real estate can shave hours off a weekend build. On the flip side, the larger frame also means you need a dedicated corner or a sturdy workbench that can handle a 150 kg structure. If you're limited to a tabletop that wobbles under a 30 kg printer, you'll probably end up reinforcing the whole setup or moving the router to a more permanent spot. Now, let's talk about the motor system because that's where most beginners get tripped up. The router comes with NEMA 23 closed-loop stepper motors. In plain language, those are the same size stepper motors you see on industrial CNCs, but the closed-loop feedback means the controller can correct missed steps automatically. For a hobbyist who's never tuned micro-stepping or dealt with lost step errors, that safety net is a real confidence booster. I saw a maker who was carving decorative wood panels for a client. He told me that the closed-loop system saved him from a costly mistake when the router hit a piece of dense hardwood and the motor tried to stall. The controller simply backed off and kept the tool path intact. The downside is that closed-loop motors draw more current and can generate additional heat, so you'll need decent ventilation around the power supply and possibly a small fan on the motor housing if you plan to run long cuts at high feed rates. Spindle power is another hot topic. The 710W trimming spindle that ships with the Axiscreat is strong enough to cut through hardwood, MDF, aluminum sheet, up to about 3 mm, and even soft plastics without bogging down. In my test scenario, cutting a 12 mm plywood panel for a custom cabinet door, the spindle maintained a clean cut at 12,000 revolutions per minute, and the chips cleared out nicely thanks to the built-in air blast. If you're only planning to etch PCB traces or engrave soft foam, that power is a bit overkill and will just raise your electricity bill a little. Conversely, if you intend to do any small-scale production of metal parts, you'll probably need a more rigid spindle mount or a dedicated coolant system, which the base machine does not include out of the box. The linear rails and ball screws are where the Axiscreat tries to separate itself from the cheaper hobby kits that still rely on groove wheels. Ball screws give you smoother motion and less backlash, which translates to tighter tolerances on parts that need to fit together, think dovetail joints or precise laser cut inserts. A friend who builds wooden drones uses the router to mill mounting brackets, and he reported that the fit was within 0.1 mm of his CAD model without any post-machining sanding. The practical weakness here is that ball screws require periodic lubrication, neglecting that maintenance can lead to squeaky movement and eventually reduced accuracy. It's a small chore, but one you have to remember if you want the machine to stay true over months of use. Modularity is baked into the design, which is a nice perk if you like to tinker. The frame can be broken down into 3 main sections, making it possible to swap in a larger spindle, add a second axis, or attach a vacuum table. People who start with simple wood projects and later branch into acrylic or soft metal will appreciate that upgrade path without having to buy an entirely new machine. However, every modular add-in costs extra, and the base price already lands you in the mid-range of hobby CNCs. If you're looking for a one-off purchase that does exactly what you need right now and you have no plans to expand, you might be paying for optionality you'll never use. So who should actually buy the Axiscreat 6060? If you're a maker who has outgrown the 300mm work area, needs the reassurance of closed-loop stepper control, and plans to tackle a mix of wood, acrylic, and occasional light metal parts, this router hits a sweet spot. It also suits small-scale entrepreneurs who